My name is Nora Whitfield, and I learned early on that in this town, some questions shouldn't be asked, not because they lack answers, but because the answers hurt more than silence. I was raised to be the exemplary pastor's daughter, soft, voice, firm posture, unwavering faith. Every Sunday, I sat in the front pew with my knees together, eyes straight ahead, lips ready to smile even when my heart wanted to flee. But behind the hymns and sermons, there was always something unsaid, a name never mentioned, a place never referenced. The house on the hill. The house with shattered windows, warped wood, and a crooked fence that grew as if trying to hide something. The earth had long tired of swallowing. They told me it was dangerous, cursed, that something terrible had happened there long before I was born. And I, obedient, believed them, until the day I saw it up close for the first time, by accident, of course, as all life-changing moments are. I was walking alone, escaping another stifling, repetitive day, when I stopped at the top of the road, just for a second, and there it was. Still, silent, so out of time it seemed to hold no grudge for being forgotten. But what gripped me wasn't the house. It was the sharp snap of a breaking branch, and when I turned, he was there. A young man I'd never seen, tall, his face dusted with dirt and eyes so intense they seemed to see more than they should. He didn't dress like the people here, didn't look like the people here, and yet for some reason not even God would dare explain, my body froze. Because the moment our eyes met, something in me stirred, something buried, ancient, maybe even forgotten, and I realized he wasn't just a stranger in town. He was a stranger in my story, and somehow, without us knowing, something had already bound us before that exchange of glances. In that moment, I knew with more certainty than any prayer I'd ever uttered, the house between us wasn't empty. It was waiting to be heard. He didn't say anything, didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't show surprise or guilt for being there. He just looked at me as if he'd known I'd come, and I stood still, as if my body was still trying to make sense of his presence. It was a strange presence, but not threatening. The kind of silence that doesn't scare, but unsettles. The kind that forces you to notice things you haven't heard in a long time. The way the wind shifts, the way your heart races without warning, the weight I carried in my chest that I never understood. And for the first time in years, I felt I wasn't being watched as the pastor's daughter. There was no judgment in his eyes. There was recognition. When he finally turned and started to walk away, something in me moved. An impulse, an urgency I couldn't name. My feet stepped forward before my reason could forbid it. "Hey," I called. The word came out quieter than I meant, as if my voice had been forgotten in the pocket of obedience. He stopped but didn't turn. The time between my call and his reaction felt like an eternity compressed into 3 seconds. Then slowly, he faced me. "You shouldn't be here," he said, and his voice was different. Deep, steady, but rough, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. "I could say the same about you," I replied, surprised by the firmness I found in myself. He glanced at the house behind me, then at the ground. Only then did he meet my eyes again. I came. "Looking for a story," he said. "Did you find it?" He hesitated. "Not yet." "But it—" And then he paused briefly, as if choosing each word with utmost care. "It seems to be waiting for me." Those words hit me in a way I couldn't explain, because they didn't sound invented. They sounded remembered, as if they came from a place deeper than thought. I should have left. That's what I would have done any other day, but not that one. Not after that look. Not after that strange name that wasn't spoken but hung in the air like a dusty memory. There in front of that stranger who spoke as if he'd known me before we met, something tore. an invisible seam holding my life in place. "What's your name?" I asked finally. He took his time, as if saying it would open a portal he'd spent his whole life trying to keep closed. "Liam," he answered. "Liam Carter." And in that instant, without understanding how, without knowing why, that name sparked something in me, something I'd never heard, but somehow swore I'd felt. After that encounter, I returned home with short steps and a chest full of noise, but I said nothing, as always. At home, too many words were sinful, and too many questions sounded like rebellion. So I put on my Sunday smile, sat at the dinner table, bowed my head during the prayer, and swallowed each spoonful like it was stones coated in potatoes. My father talked about Wednesday's service. My mother commented on the new flower arrangement for the altar. Everything followed the same lukewarm routine, but inside me, something had ignited. And now, even with hot food and a solid roof overhead, I felt outside. That night, I locked myself in my room with the windows shut and my heart restless. I grabbed my diary, the old leather-bound notebook where I kept thoughts too big for the church pews, and wrote, "Liam Carter. He said he's looking for a story, but I think the story is looking for me too." In the days that followed, I couldn't get the house out of my mind. It crept into my dreams, flashed during services, reflected in the car windows, and strangely, Liam did too. I started going to the hill more often, pretending I needed air, that I wanted to be alone, but deep down, hoping to see him. And I did, more than once. He never called out to me, never invaded my space. He just looked, listened, walked around the house like someone searching for the right word in a forgotten book. And each time we crossed paths, the feeling grew. There was something between us that came from far away, from before, from another time, something unexplained, but already decided. It was on one of those visits to the house that everything changed. I was alone, or so I thought. I approached the front porch, something I'd never have dared before. I placed my hand on the old wood. It was warm even in the late afternoon chill. When I pushed the door, there was no creak, no resistance. The house simply let me. And I entered. The smell was of the past, dust, damp wood, and something else. Something that gave me nausea and longing at once. I walked down the main hallway without thinking, guided by a force I didn't understand. And then I saw it, a portrait. Old, faded, covered by cracked glass and a worn frame. A woman with dark hair, a serene expression, her arms wrapped around a baby with big eyes. My skin prickled, because the woman's face was almost identical to mine. My hands trembled when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned in a panic, and there he was. Liam, with the same look as always, but now more serious, deeper. "You shouldn't have come in alone," he said. "I didn't come in alone," I replied. He looked at the portrait. His jaw tightened. Then in a low voice, he confessed, "That woman, she was my grandmother." The air vanished from my lungs. I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. I looked at the portrait again, at myself, at him, and then it all clicked, like ancient pieces finally touching. "This isn't a coincidence," I whispered. Liam shook his head slowly. "No, this is a return." My reflection in the mirror wasn't the same anymore. Not that my face had changed. My eyes were still mine, my hair tied back the same way, the same pale skin that never got along with the sun. But there was something there, something behind it, a strangeness, a presence, as if I were watching someone who's still me, but who now carries questions too big for the mold I was raised in. After I entered that house, and saw the portrait after Liam said the woman was his grandmother, and I felt, with every cell in my body, that she was mine too. Nothing fit right anymore. It was as if a secret had started moving inside me. An ancient secret, the kind you don't find in books or sermons. The kind that doesn't begin when you discover it, but when you remember it. I spent that night awake, lying in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling as if expecting an answer to fall from the beams. The bedroom walls felt smaller, closer, and every sound in the house echoed as if I were hearing with new ears. My mother knocked on my door around 3 in the morning, asking if everything was okay. I said yes, but it wasn't. Because for the first time, I felt something bigger than my life trying to emerge, and no one, not even those who raised me, seemed to want me to know what it was. The next day, I went back to the house. Liam was there. He always was. As if we were two pieces of the same story the town had tried to tear apart and bury, but that now insisted on drawing back together. He didn't say much. Just pointed to the upstairs where a narrow, dusty staircase waited. We climbed in silence. At the end of the hallway was a room with the door ajar. The smell there was different, not of neglect, but of living memory. On the floor, a metal box, locked with a padlock, rested like a scar. Liam knelt, pulled a small key from his pocket. I didn't ask where it came from. He didn't explain. Inside the box were letters, photos, old certificates, a cassette tape, things that shouldn't exist but did, and all pointed to the same, not. The names Whitfield and Carter stitched together across lines of the past. My heart pounded so hard I wondered if Liam could hear it. I picked up the yellowest letter and read it softly aloud. It was written by a woman named Miriam. The words were short, cut by haste and desperation. She spoke of a child taken in a rush, a covered-up fire, a deal made in the dark. And at the end, with faltering handwriting, she wrote, "If she ever returns, don't let them call her a sin. She's what's left of us." I closed my eyes. The words stuck to my skin. Because they weren't just about the past. They were about me. "Nora," Liam murmured. "The woman in the letter. Miriam. That's my grandmother's name." I nodded silently. I didn't need to say anything, because it was all being said there, in the spaces between. And for the first time, I understood. My story didn't begin with me, but maybe it would end with me. The names in the papers felt alive. They burned. Some were scratched out, others scribbled over as if someone had tried to erase the connection between two families by force but couldn't finish. It was as if the past screamed silently inside that box, waiting for someone to finally have the courage to listen. And I listened, with my eyes, with my skin, with my soul. After returning from the house, everything around me felt false. The church walls seemed narrower, my father's pulpit taller, more distant from me. Every word spoken in the next service sounded like an echo, a rehearsed repetition, beautiful on the outside, hollow within. I wondered if he knew, if my mother, and knew, if everyone knew, and if their collective silence was part of a pact bigger than any biblical commandment, a pact that hid truths like sins and treated the innocent like stains to be covered. That night, I waited for my mother to sleep. I entered my father's study, the one they always told me to respect like a temple within the house. I searched the drawers carefully, and at the back of one, I found what I didn't know I was looking for. An old photo, folded in half. A woman smiling with a baby in her arms. The same woman from the house's portrait, and on the back, a single, word handwritten, her. I woke the next day with a dry throat and hands still trembling. Liam was waiting at the church gate, as if he knew I'd come broken. And there, in the shadow of the stained glass, I spoke what I hadn't yet dared think clearly. I think that woman, Miriam, my voice faltered. I think she was my real mother. He didn't say anything, just placed his hand on my shoulder, firm. That gesture steadied me more than any hug ever could. In the days that followed, the town began to change. Or maybe I'd changed so much that nothing fit me anymore. The women from the prayer circle looked at me with curiosity, as if they sensed something in me was out of place. And they were right. Because everything I'd been taught to be was in pieces, and every piece pointed the same way. The house, the name, the secret. I returned to the house with Liam the next week after the dust of our silences settled. We climbed to the attic, and there we found what might have been the last attempt to shout the truth, a diary. Its fragile pages told a story of forbidden love, of two young people torn apart by faith, guilt, shame, and in the middle of it all, a girl, a baby left with the Whitfields to be raised far from the Carter name, for safety, for appearances, for cowardice. My name wasn't a sin, but it had been treated as one, and there, with my hands on that diary, and the past spilling from the pages like reopened wounds, I knew I could never go back to who I'd been, even if I tried. Because once you look truth in the eyes, lying to yourself becomes unbearable. The sky felt lower that night, or that, as if even it were bowing under the weight of the truths hovering over my home. I walked to the porch slowly, Miriam's diary pressed against my chest, my eyes burning not from tears but from exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion born when you stop deceiving yourself. And I was exhausted, from smiling at church as if everything was fine, from calling a man father who looked at me without ever seeing me whole, from pretending the abandoned house was just an old place, not the origin of a pain I couldn't name. I waited until I heard the click of their bedroom light switch. Their routine was predictable. They turned off the lights just after 10, and, even in sleep, their vigilance lingered in spirit. My father always said God saw everything, but in that moment, I needed to be seen by myself. I entered the study again, not with fear, but with anger. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that festers silently, the kind built from years of forced obedience and smothered questions. I opened the drawer where I'd found the photo, and there it was, as if waiting for me, as if it knew I'd return. Beside it, an old envelope with the seal of a medical institution in the capital. Inside, the remnants of an adoption document, my name, my father's signature, the same date as the fire that destroyed Miriam's house. I sat on the floor. My hands shook. My whole body shook. The floor seemed to spin beneath me, and no prayer could anchor me. In that instant, I knew with every piece of my being. They knew. They'd always known. They raised me to forget who I was, molded me to fit what they needed me to be, not out of love, but out of convenience. The door opened slowly. I turned in a jolt. It was him, my father. He looked at me with a mix of sadness and hardness. He didn't approach, didn't raise his voice, just said, "You shouldn't have touched that." "But I did," I replied, trying to hold the firmness my chest couldn't sustain. "And now I want to know everything." He took a deep breath, sat at the desk, and for the first time spoke to me like someone who knows they've lost control. "Your mother, Miriam, she was too young and full of fire. She fell in love with someone she shouldn't have. Liam Carter was the son of a man who'd left the church, a rebel, a problem. When she showed up pregnant, your grandfather threatened to disown her. The whole town turned its back. And then, the fire. And you let her burn?" "No." He stood, his eyes full of something between guilt and denial. She died before the fire. No one knows exactly how. But the baby, you were alive. And no one wanted to know, except me. You stole me. He shook his head slowly. I saved you. The silence between us was heavy as sin. No, I said. You hid me, and that's not love. That's fear. I went upstairs with dry eyes and a heart in ruins. On the way, I passed my mother. She saw me, said nothing. But her eyes were full, and in that look, I realized what she'd never have the courage to confess aloud. She knew too, and she'd carried the weight since the day she took me in her arms. At dawn, I left a note on the mirror. You gave me a roof, a name, and rules. But you didn't give me truth. Now I'll find it with someone who isn't afraid of it. And I left because loving, sometimes, is also disobeying. The road was empty, but my chest wasn't. Each step felt like shedding a second skin, as if I were peeling away, bit by bit, the girl they'd taught me to be. Nora Whitfield, the pastor's daughter, soft voice, straight spine, restrained smile, the one who knew how to wait, to stay silent, to accept. She was still in me, but not in front. Now another version led my steps, a version without a name yet, but one that knew it didn't want to live in the silence of others anymore. Liam was waiting at the roadside, beside an old pickup truck. He didn't ask what happened, didn't demand explanations, just opened the car door and looked into my eyes as if to say, I knew you'd come. I got in. The engine rumbled and we drove without a clear destination, but with a purpose, heavy as the sky before a storm. We drove for hours. The radio was off. The road was long. But the silence between us was never awkward. It was the kind that grows between two people who no longer need to prove anything to each other. After a while, he spoke. Did you find out? I nodded. Not, taking my eyes off the road. I did. And now I don't know where to put it all. He gripped the steering wheel, squeezed, as if holding something he couldn't name either. You don't need to put it anywhere. You just need to carry it. We fell silent again, until we spotted atop a ridge a small abandoned church, broken windows, a crooked cross, and behind it, an old cemetery. Without knowing why, I asked him to stop there. Something about that place called to me. We walked up. The wind cut sharply, but I didn't care. Behind the church, among weathered graves, was a newer headstone, the name nearly illegible, but enough to bring me to my knees. Miriam Carter, her birth date, her death date, and a phrase carved with unhurried hands. She was light until the end. I touched the cold stone with my fingertips. A shiver ran up my spine. But it wasn't fear. It was recognition. As if she saw me there kneeling and said without words, "It took a while, but you're here." I cried without sound, cried like someone emptying their body, like someone freeing ghosts for the first time. Liam knelt beside me. He pulled an old necklace from his pocket with a key-shaped pendant. It was hers, he said. They told me if I ever found someone with her eyes, I should give it to them. I took the chain with still trembling hands. The key was small, delicate, and for some reason, I felt it opened more than a door. It opened a new version of me. I stood, took a deep breath, looked at the horizon and knew, with a certainty that needed no proof, what wounded me also shaped me. What was hidden from me was now mine to expose, and what was taken from me, I'd rebuild piece by piece, even if it hurt. We returned to town with dirt-stained bodies and hearts full of a new silence. Not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that teaches. I stopped in front of the Whitfield house at dusk. My mother was on the porch. When she saw me, her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded as if understanding there are things neither time nor love can fix, but that still deserve to be felt. My father didn't come out, and I didn't go in. That night I left the town without needing to announce it. I took only what mattered. I carried the letters, the diary, the key, and Liam. We traveled without plans, just with a direction, a new beginning. Today when people ask my name, I still say Nora. But inside I know I'm more. I'm Miriam's daughter. I'm the granddaughter of the land they denied me. I'm the blood they burned trying to hide, but that still pulses too strong to vanish. And now I'm mine. Whole for the first time. I still dream of the house. Sometimes it appears intact, with open windows and laughing voices inside. Other times it's in ruins, covered in leaves, time tangled in its walls. But what never changes is the feeling, belonging. Not for what it was, but for what it revealed. My life now happens far from the town where I was born, or rather, where I was raised. I travel with Liam, discovering places that don't carry ghosts but welcome scars. We've built a home without high walls, where no question is forbidden, and where love isn't something earned by merit, but offered through courage. Sometimes I catch myself looking in the mirror, trying to recognize all the faces I've been. The pastor's daughter, the obedient girl, the curious one, the betrayed, the forgotten heir, the woman who returned to her roots to rebuild herself. And in all of them, there's a truth no one can erase anymore. I exist, I belong, and now I tell my own story.